What is up, guys? It's your boy Rick Kakis, and today we are going to be showcasing the 10 most used exotic weapons for PvE right now within Destiny 2 Season of the Deep. And these lists are always really interesting, right? Because they're unburdened by personal opinion. It's just raw data coming from DestinyTracker.com. So it factors in how good they are, how easy they are to get, how relevant they are in the activities available right now, and to give you guys an example of the craziness, coming in at number 11, or honorable mention, is the ARBALEST linear fusion rifle. A lot of people would put this as their literal best PvE exotic weapon in the entire game. It's got built-in anti-champion. It is so good in Nightfalls and Grandmasters, but again, it doesn't even crack the top 10 of what people are actually using in the game right now. So let's get started here with number 10, and that's going to be the COLDHEART exotic trace rifle with 0.842% of usage. And the other values are the percent of kills in red and the percent of headshots in orange. So I'm actually happy to see the COLDHEART here because I thought this was a really underrated exotic, especially for the meta right now. The COLDHEART is going to ramp up in damage the longer you shoot it, and when it is ramped up, it actually does a pretty significant amount of damage. It got some pretty big buffs recently as well. Trace rifles themselves have gotten buffed several times pretty recently, and the COLDHEART is actually going to automatically generate ionic traces when it's in the high damage state. Well, right now in the meta, arc is absolutely bussin', right? Because of that seasonal artifact, there's multiple perks that you can have on that really benefit arc builds. So the fact that you can just use this exotic and it's making ionic traces, which is recharging your arc abilities, it's potentially giving you armor charge if you're using the right armor mods and stuff like that. It is just an overall great weapon to use. Oh, and right now trace rifles can get overload rounds for the seasonal artifact. Now, moving on from there to number 9, it's going to be the GRAVITON Lance Exotic Pulse Rifle. And this is interesting because I bet a week ago or a couple weeks ago, this was not in the top 10. And that's because it got an absolutely massive buff recently, doing 60% more damage than it previously was. And so a lot of people are hopping on the GRAVITON Lance bandwagon. So this pulse rifle is going to have a 2-round burst, which makes it pretty unique, and also it's going to cause this crazy multitude of void explosions when you are able to kill an enemy. So in terms of crowd control, it is fantastic. But again, that absolutely massive damage buff, combined with the fact that its catalyst actually gives it Vorpal weapon for more damage against bosses and so on, means that against more powerful yellow bar targets, this primary actually shreds them. So it's not just a red bar killer, it can actually do some pretty good damage against more powerful enemies. However, moving on from there, guys, coming in at number 8, we actually have the OSTEO STRIGA. So this exotic submachine gun has kind of always had a place in some of the most used exotics for PvE, and that's because you actually got it guaranteed for purchasing the Witch Queen expansion, and I believe you still do. Maybe something has changed, but a lot of people got it just through doing that, so they didn't have to rely on RNG to acquire it. Also, you end up crafting it and eventually crafting its exotic catalyst onto it and stuff like that. So again, it's very deterministic, not relying on RNG to acquire, and also it's just a very, very good weapon in and of itself. As you can see, when you kill an enemy, you're going to have like kind of a poison spread effect that is going to cause significant damage over time to nearby enemies. You can actually combine this with the Warlock exotic necrotic grip gauntlets, and then enemies killed by the poison effect will actually explode again and keep spreading that poison effect. So that's a pretty crazy combo, but also this gun's bullets actually have a seeking effect, so you don't even really need to aim that hard, and the bullets will curve and hit enemies by themselves. So perfect if you just want to turn your brain off and shoot and kill everything on your screen. However, it's time to move on from there to number 7, which is the GJALLARHORN exotic rocket launcher. Now, interestingly, its kills percent is actually pretty low compared to what we just looked at, and that's mainly because this is used in damage phases. this. So right now we kind of have a rocket launcher DPS meta, but for that DPS meta to work, for rocket launchers to actually be viable at taking down raid bosses and stuff that they're taking down right now, you need to have one person in the fire team with a GJALLARHORN, because the GJALLARHORN's exotic perk is going to make legendary rocket launchers significantly more powerful by giving them the wolf pack rounds that explode and curve in and do so much more damage. And so that's why you see its usage so high. Like, every single rocket damage phase has to have one person with the GJALLARHORN, and just using it in general, if you're doing lower level content as well, this thing can absolutely slaughter more powerful enemies and groups of enemies and pretty much anything you come across just by itself. A really overall fantastic weapon, and again, a key to a lot of higher level DPS strategies. Now, moving on from there, guys, coming in at number 6, it's gonna be the WITHERHOARD exotic grenade launcher. I'm honestly surprised this thing isn't higher, because I would argue that this could be one of, if not the best overall, like, PvE exotics in the entire game. It's a grenade launcher that is actually going to shoot out a blight. And so that means you can shoot it at an enemy and that enemy will start taking damage over time, or you can shoot it at the ground and any enemies who walk through that area of effect are going to start taking damage over time. So the things you can do with the WITHERHOARD are absolutely insane. If you're DPSing a boss, you can use it to apply that extra tick damage and squeeze out even more damage. If you're using it against large groups of enemies, you can completely lock down zones by shooting it at where enemies spawn from, just instantly killing them all. It is such a fantastic and versatile weapon. Again, very surprised to see it come in here at number 6. However, it is time to move on from there to number 5, and that's actually going to be the Wishender exotic bow. So this thing actually got some pretty significant buffs recently. Mainly, it is now an anti-barrier weapon. So people are using it quite a bit in terms of solo lost sectors and, you know, grandmasters, nightfalls and stuff like that to deal with those barrier champions, because this bow actually hits like a truck. It's a primary bow, so it has infinite ammo, but it hits harder than any other bow in the game, except obviously for the Leviathan's Breath. But I digress. Because of that broadhead perk, that means it's gonna have additional damage numbers popping up. So even in higher level content, even in grandmasters, you hit something with the Wishender and you absolutely chunk their health. And so again, it's just so viable in a lot of different types of content, even scaling into the end game because of those anti-champion properties. Now, moving on from there, guys, coming in at number 4, we have kind of a personal favorite of mine right now, the MALFEASANCE exotic hand cannon. I did an entire video on this thing when its new exotic catalyst became available just this season, and obviously the fact that it has a brand new catalyst for the season is pushing its usage rate, because when people hop on for the season and get its catalyst, they're obviously going to, you know, use it with this gun. But the MALFEASANCE is absolutely cracking right now. Its damage archetype 180 RPM hand cannons have gotten buffed several times over the past few months, and so it has a 20 round magazine, like no recoil. You can go full auto thanks to the full auto setting in your menu, and it also now has Vorpal weapon thanks to its catalyst, and it has built-in unstoppable rounds. It is just fantastic for lost sectors, and I've even used it in grandmasters and it performs great there as well. Just a great overall weapon. Now, moving on from there, guys, in the top 3, at number 3, we have the CENTRIFUSE exotic auto rifle. This is really interesting because I actually don't think this exotic is that powerful. I mean, it's going to charge up when you sprint, it's going to reload as you're sprinting, which is nice. When it is fully charged, it's going to cause a big arc blinding explosion against enemies. That's pretty decent, but keeping it charged in a lot of scenarios can be tough, and its performance against more powerful enemies, yellow bars, is really lackluster. In fact, I think every other exotic we looked at to this point is better than the CENTRIFUSE. It's not terrible, but guys, this right here is the perfect example of ease to acquire. This is the Season Pass featured exotic for Season of the Deep, so everyone can get their hands on this thing, paid or free, and it's just a very accessible exotic. It's definitely not terrible, and so bringing it into lower level content, it's going to perform fine, and that's why you're seeing it just so high on this list, is ease to acquire. Now, moving on from there, at number 2, we actually have the Thunderlord exotic machine gun. This is almost the opposite. I think this thing is cracked, and I think it does deserve a very high position on this list. So the Thunderlord is going to, as you're shooting enemies, it's going to cause lightning strikes to come down and do additional damage. When you kill enemies, it's going to cause those lightning strikes as well. So unbelievably good at ad clearing, and with its catalyst, those lightning strikes will actually reload the magazine partially from reserves. So you can just put the Thunderlord over a boss, hold the trigger, and literally ride the lightning, baby. You are going to be doing so much damage. In fact, the Thunderlord was so good in terms of DPS, it was used to one-phase kill certain raid bosses. Now, part of that was a bit of a glitch with the divinity that's since been fixed. That's beside the point. The Thunderlord, for how good it is at ad clearing, the fact that it also puts up really impressive DPS numbers against bosses means that you can throw it on, especially in an arc build that, like I said, is super meta right now thanks to the seasonal artifact, and you can do absolute work with it. Now, moving on from there, guys, coming in at number 1, the most used exotic weapon for PvE right now in the entire game is actually the Quicksilver Storm exotic auto rifle. And this isn't just usage, like you can see, it also has the biggest percent of kills and the second most headshots actually to the Centrifuge, funny enough, that we've seen on this entire list. So it's actually slaying out as well as just getting a high usage. Now, why is this so high? Well, like the OSTEO STRIGA was with Witch Queen, the Quicksilver Storm was the exotic that you got for purchasing the newest Lightfall expansion. So again, there's no RNG involved in this thing. You buy Lightfall, you're gonna get the Quicksilver Storm. So very deterministic in how you get it. So a lot of people do have access to it, and it's actually just a very phenomenal exotic weapon. Its exotic perk actually shoots out rockets as you're damaging enemies, so against more powerful enemies, like the DPS you get from this thing is actually quite impressive. And when you hit with those rockets, you're going to actually charge up an alternate grenade launcher mode, as you can see, and you can actually like one-shot red bars with the grenade launcher mode, even up to Grandmaster difficulty. You can like shoot it and get, triple kills against red bars, which again, in that difficulty is actually pretty darn impressive. And most importantly, with the release of Lightfall, like this was actually made available before from pre-ordering, but with Lightfall, they also added an exotic catalyst, and that actually turns this into a Strand weapon from previously a kinetic. So if you did purchase Lightfall and you're trying to run a Strand build, the fact that this is so easy to get and is also now a Strand weapon thanks to its catalyst, and the catalyst is also going to make that grenade launcher mode actually make tangles, means that it's super synergistic with Strand builds. So it's just really easy to slot into a Strand build and really improve its performance and synergy within that build. And so that's why I think it totally makes sense you're seeing the Quicksilver Storm as the most used exotic weapon for PvE right now. And so guys, there you have it. Let me know in the comments section if there's any weapons that you're surprised didn't make this list. For me, again, the fact that ARBALEST is number 11 blows my mind. Hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and found it informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That is linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.